Call this meeting to order. This is the Tuesday, November 12th, Council Informational Meeting, and I'd like to welcome everybody to this session. And we're going to kick it right off right away with a very exciting report. Lori Hogshead, City Clerk, please.
Switch these, there we go. So we don't have buttons to even touch, so I couldn't change it. All right, thank you. Lori Hogshead, City Clerk. I am here to give a report on the referred rezoning ordinance. And my report today will specifically talk about the affidavit and the review of the affidavit. I did give a report in September about our cursory review and random review. So our 5% random. So I'm just going to step into the portion of the affidavit of signatures. The affidavit of signature deficiencies was presented to me on September 9th of 2013. At that time, our team was still working on our cursory check and the random check of the petitions which we needed to complete. That was completed on the 27th and presented to this body at the first informational meeting in October. Once that was completed, I started working on the affidavit on the week of September 30th. I completed it on November 5, so that was about 5 weeks. I do have the hours if you're interested. It was 160 hours total working on the project. The report, it took me probably about 2 days to finalize the report. That was finalized on Thursday the 7th, and as soon as that was hot off the press, I sent out the press release and the letters to both the Save Our Neighborhood group and the Walmart group. The final report is available out on the city's website, and it totals 157 pages. Of the signatures that I reviewed, the affidavit stated there were 2,084, but actually, in totality, it was 2,181. I was not able to come up with that 2084 number because they duplicated in some places. They mentioned things, for instance, they mentioned blank lines for some of the petitions, but not the others. So when I went through everything completely, I reviewed for Exhibit A, I reviewed 21, I counted that as 21 signatures that weren't duplicated elsewhere. And Exhibit A referred to those that had issues with the notary or potential issues with the notary or the circulator. As far as the list of names to review, which is Exhibit B, which was by far the largest, that entailed 1,939 signature lines. And then Exhibit C were those that potentially signed duplicate petitions, and that involved an additional 44 signatures. Throughout this process, when we look at a petition holds a total of 20 signatures. If the petition is full all the way through, we count that as 20 signature lines. Now, there are times where a line is crossed out upon receipt or it's just simply blank. Sometimes the front is blank, the first 7 lines are blank, but the back is filled out. In that case, we take the very last signature, and that's the total number of signature lines. In reviewing these, I did take out 149 lines that were either crossed out or not filled out. So really those weren't rejected, so to speak, but they were just either blank or crossed out upon receipt. Some interesting facts along the way. We talked about individuals signing twice. There were 38 individuals that did sign twice, 1 that signed 3 times. As far as inactive, the voter registration records, and I'll give the difference between inactive and purged. There were 10 that were listed as inactive on the voter registration rolls, but they're still on the voter registration list. They're in the process of making their way toward the purge list, but they're still considered registered voters even though they're listed as inactive. So I did find 10 of those, and I counted those as valid signatures. On the purge list, this was a little more tricky because the lists were purged after the signatures were obtained, and they were obtained between August 10th and August 30th. Every single signature that I could not find through the total vote, which I had access to, I sent to the corresponding counties to review to see if they were purged, if I was not reading something right, just to find out. And out of those, they found 20 that were purged, 20 total. Those were not counted because by that point, the person has not had any activity for 8 years, meaning they've been sent 2 different notifications, they've had opportunity to contact their auditor, they haven't voted, they've done nothing in 8 years. So those 20 names were not counted. Illegible, many illegible. I guess in the whole scheme of things, it's not that many, but just under 100. Some of those, I feel I'm very good at deciphering signatures, working on the alcohol licensing all these years, but there were quite a group that I just could not make out. Some we did find by address, and it made sense when you looked at the name after that, but there were a group that I simply just could not read and did not count those. So total, invalid or rejected were 1,159, and that included the 149 blank or crossed out lines that I mentioned earlier. So all in all, as far as signatures that were rejected, 1,010, and they needed 5,089, and once I deducted that from our initial count, the group had 254 signatures above the 5,089 that were needed. As a result, this item will be going to the ballot in April 2014. A couple interesting things to note. The signature validity rate when we did our 5% random was 86%, and Councilman Jameson brought this up to me the other day and was just questioning how close we were to that, because we've been using the 5% for our 4 drives that we've had within the last 12 months, 4 petition drives. And by going through this affidavit process, the end result was 82%, so really very close. And that, in a way, it was nice to know how close we really were doing that 5%. A couple other items to note is I did not have any kind of a tally or a sum total on the report as I went through it. Actually, I didn't want to know until I was completely finished. And so as I went through them, I just checked each name on their own merit. I either put, yes, I was going to validate it, or no, I was not. And when I was finished, which was after the 5 weeks, then Dave Bixler came in, our budget analyst, the council's budget analyst, and he put in the magic he does on the Excel spreadsheet and provided the numbers to me. So I just want to make that clear that during the whole process, I had no idea what the numbers, how they would come out between the valid and the invalid. Important to note during all this is to thank Secretary of State Jason Gant for his assistance. Spent much time on the phone with them, him and his staff members. Minnehaha County and Lincoln County Auditor's offices, both of the women that work with the election, spent hours and hours on this, looking up every one of those 1,010 names they also looked at. So thank you to them. City Attorney Fifley, I wish he were here today, but he put in a great deal of time helping me with the legal aspect of it, which was the report that I had to do at the very end. And of course, Assistant City Clerks Tamara Jorgensen and Denise Tucker, because they took care of all the office responsibilities so I could hole up in that little room and work on petitions. So thank you to all of them. In addition to this, I had previously, before I had this slight detour, been working on the 2014 election information to have out on the website. Didn't get real far, and this came in, and so my goal is to have the website up to date the very beginning of December. Dave Fifley and I are going to meet next week on the election calendar. We're going to meet on the financial statements, and we're also going to meet on the candidate booklet. So I hope to have all of that information out there available in early December. We are going to give a report, or I am, and Dave as well, at the Public Services Committee on amendments to our election ordinance to tie in with a recent legislative session. So that we're going to try to get done as well before the end of the year. But I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Lori, thank you very much. Are there any comments or questions for Lori? Yes, Councilor Erpenbach.
I just wanted to express my thanks as well. This has been a real lesson in civics for a lot of us. Had no idea that it was going to take you 5 weeks and 160 hours. You know, that's important to all of us as citizens, that you took that kind of time and that were that specific with it. I just appreciate your work and your staff as well. I know they've been awesome. There have been times when I've said, "Can't Lori help me?" Nope, she's busy. So it's been a really good experience all the way around. So thanks for your work, Lori.
You bet. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Lori, I think I have to extend that thank you also. I think on behalf of the citizens of Sioux Falls and the city council, you did a fantastic job, and it was some groundbreaking territory that we were in. I do understand that. And the professionalism that we saw, I think the process works. It's a great process. Some of us sometimes question it, but this is one of those great processes that did work, and thank you very much for all your work.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Lori. And then we're going to have a couple of presentations coming up here. The first one, excuse me, I jumped ahead of myself. This is a time for city council open discussion. Are there any things to come before the council at this time? Councilor Staggers, please.
Yes, over the past few weeks, there's been a concern expressed to me about the situation down at the Multicultural Center when it comes to open meetings. Apparently, down there they continue to have meetings that are closed, and since we support the Multicultural Center to the tune, I'm trying to recall from memory, $160,000 a year or so, those meetings should be opened, and there's a person out in the audience right now who knows more about this than me if we would like to ask him any questions about what's going on.
I think what I would like to do, I think what I'll do is take this under advisement. I'm going to pass this on and ask for a specific report, I believe, from the Multicultural Center.
Okay.
Excuse me?
The attorney's office.
Right, through the attorney's office, and we'll do that. Okay, we'll approach it through there, and we'll get some more information back to you.
Okay.
Is that all right?
That sounds
Councilor
fine.
Anderson?
I guess I'd like that information also passed to the intergovernmental committee, which is the city and county that are supposed to overlook the Multicultural Center.
You know, really, if I might.
Okay,
Mr.
Councilor
Chair,
Erpenbach.
Really, Councilor Anderson's right. They have more control over the MCC than we do. I mean, we put money into it, but that intergovernmental group is the first group this should go to.
What we'll do is pass that on to the city attorney's office, and we'll get some answers. And Councilor Staggers, we'll get some answers from them and possibly get a report on that.
Okay, that sounds
good?
fine.
Anything else? Councilor Erp?
I just want to give a brief summary of last week's fiscal committee meeting. We had a presentation by Director of Finance, Tracy Turback, and I would recommend to any of you that weren't able to be present for that presentation on the city's bonding. It was basically the ABCs of bonding, and I would recommend that you do take a look at the video of that. He put it in very understandable terms. We have also asked that this be part of orientation for new council members because of the way that the presentation was organized. It makes it very understandable for all.
Councilor Aguilar, thank you. Are there any other comments? Councilor Jamison, please.
I just wanted to add part of that discussion. I thought it was very well, was well informative. We could all probably use a handout because of some of the details in it, and I think Dave could probably provide a lot of solutions for us, Dave Bixler. One other item that came up in the discussion that I think we're all going to be a part of soon is the $9.7 million that we received back from the Corps, and it's clear from that meeting that the debt service that we had taken out, that we received the reimbursement for, we cannot pay back until 2018. So 5 years from now. So the question was, what do you do with that money? And part of the conversation was, well, some of that money can earn interest, but it's a small amount that it would earn. And certainly paying off that debt is the priority issue and reason that we got that money back, but we just can't use it until 18. So what do you do until then? That's going to be one of our big challenges and our questions. So anyway, we just started that discussion a little bit, and the fiscal committee's involved in that. Just a little notice.
Councilor Aguilar.
Also, Director Turbeck is finalizing a memo to the council as a whole as to suggestions as to how those dollars can be utilized.
Counselor Rolfing?
Yeah, I should also, Counselor Jameis and I held our first task force, transit task force meeting last week, which was well attended, 18 people. I think there's only 2 people who were unable to attend. We got a good start with some information from San Trebilcock and Amber Gibson, yes. And so we have a basis to get started on, and we're excited about where we're going. We met again today to kind of outline some areas that we're gonna go into and how we're gonna proceed from here. And we think we're gonna come up with, we hope we're gonna come up with some very good suggestions, some help. So just to give you an idea, just to let you know, we're well on our way.
Good, thank you. Okay, we'll get into the presentations then. First presentation we have is the indoor tennis facility agreement with the Sioux Falls Tennis Association. I believe Dave Fisher and Bill will be here, Bill Townsend will be here.
Good afternoon, City Council. Dave Fisher, Assistant Director, Parks and Recreation. And first of all, I want to thank you for your time this afternoon. We appreciate the opportunity to discuss these 2 agreements that will help bring to reality 2 new indoor recreation venues in our community. These agreements were negotiated with the organization simultaneously in order to offer consistency in terms of the partnerships that are involved. I'd also like to thank Karen Leonard from the City Attorney's Office and Janelle Zare from Finance, who worked with our staff to develop the agreements. If it's okay with the council leadership, what I'd like to do is go through the tennis agreement and really just kind of the main bullets as I see them.
Please.
And then we could open it up for questions.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Sioux Falls Tennis Association agreement. First of all, Sioux Falls Tennis Association anticipates beginning construction on their facility in the spring of 2014 and then completing the construction in the fall of 2014. The 2013 approved CIP includes $500,000 to assist them in the construction of the facility through the purchase of equipment and other improvements. Exhibit D of the agreement is a representative list of items that can meet the criteria for being purchased with CIP funds. However, the final selection of the items that would be purchased will be reviewed and agreed upon between finance, the parks team, and as well as Sioux Falls Tennis. But will in no case exceed the $500,000. So Exhibit D is meant to be not the list, but it's a representative list of the types of equipment that could be purchased. Would mention also that all of the purchases of city equipment will have to meet state law and city ordinance. The equipment, after it's purchased, will remain as equipment that would be owned by the city, but would be maintained by Sioux Falls Tennis Association according to and in compliance with manufacturer recommendations. There is no obligation on the part of the city to replace any of the items when they are past their useful life. In exchange for the commitment of the CIP funding, the city will gain not only a much anticipated indoor facility for the sport of tennis in our community, but also the availability of open public court hours for the general public. The schedule for open public court hours is subject to the approval of the city, and records of public usage will be kept by Sioux Falls Tennis Association so that we can determine the effectiveness of the hours. Parks and Recreation will also hold a position on the board that oversees the facility. I'd also like to mention the Parks and Recreation Board voted unanimously on October 22nd to recommend approval of the agreement to the City Council, and our intention is to have the agreement on the consent agenda for the City Council meeting on November 19th. Bill Townsend has been instrumental in the development of the agreement on behalf of the Sioux Falls Tennis Association and is here today in the audience to help answer any questions that the council may have. And with that, I would certainly open it up to any questions.
Any questions? Councilor Staggers, please.
Yes, just a first comment I'd like to make. Dave, I I would prefer you wouldn't put it on the consent calendar next week, because it's not going to stay there.
Okay.
Also, I just want to clarify here. We have $500,000 in the CIP right now for the tennis association. We have not given any of that money to the tennis association, is that right?
That's correct.
And so they're supposed to complete their financing and so forth before we give them the money.
Correct.
And so, from what I understand, that's not going to happen by the end of this year, but probably next year. Is that fair to say?
Well, in visiting with the finance team, they're believing that we would need to get a representation from their bank that the amount of funds needed to build the facility are secured.
Right, and it doesn't look like we're going to have it this year, does it? At least the information I have.
Well, we would need to have it. We would need to have that certification that they've secured the funding prior to them getting our $500,000. So we'll work with finance to make sure that we have the necessary proof, if you will.
Well, I'm assuming it's not going to be this year, but having said that, then we would take the money from our 2013 CIP and then pay it in 2014. Is that right to them, if they have this financing secured in 2014?
Yeah, if the equipment is actually purchased in 2014, the money that's in 2013 would be carried forward
Okay, yes.
to use to purchase that equipment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds fine. Also, I am a little concerned here about Section 6, dealing with the open court scheduling. There's nothing really very specific as to how much the city's going to get out of that. It doesn't say like we're going to get 10 hours a week or 15 hours a week or whatever the case might be. Can you say some more about that?
Yeah, I think in Exhibit E, the Sioux Falls Tennis Association has put forward kind of a initial plan, if you will. But there's no doubt we need to get this place open and functional. And so those hours are hard to pin down right now. But that's also why the provision in the agreement for the public hours we made so that the city has to approve of it. So we'll be there right with them, identifying, what we believe are prudent and consistent hours for public usage.
Yeah, Exhibit E talks about when they plan to be open and so forth. But can you give me some idea of how many hours we might expect for the city to get? I'm not, wanting to hold you to this, but just a rough idea. 10 hours a week, or is that, what sounds reasonable?
I don't know, may I defer to Bill and see if he's got any further information on that? Sure.
Please, Bill.
Thanks for having me today.
Introduce yourself if you could for the record, please.
Yeah, I'm Bill Townsend. I'm a volunteer chairperson that's heading up over 60 volunteers in our community to build a community indoor tennis center on land that was donated to our organization out at the Sanford Youth Sports Complex. Councilman Staggers, I guess when we were working with Karen and the folks through the Park and Rec, as far as the public hours, if I understand your question, if I don't, please help me, but the only time it will not be open to the public would be if we had a special event scheduled for the time. That could be things like a youth tennis tournament. It could be maybe one of our colleges accessing renting the facility for, say, a match that they have scheduled, something of, so a tournament supporting our high schools or our colleges would be the only times it would not be open to the public. So we wrestled a little bit about what was the best way to communicate that because the idea of the facility is a community facility. And so other than those special rental agreements that we might have with, like I said, a college or high school or a youth or adult tournament, everything else is open to the public. Also, this came up at the Park and Rec discussion that we had, and having a representative from the city on our board to oversee the facility, I think will enable them to have that insight, and also reporting back on a monthly basis to the Park and Rec what the monthly usage is, I think will help with that.
So you're not going to have a certain amount of time set aside for members of your group?
Well, the only, the way the business plan reads is that if you want to pay an annual fee to be a member, the only thing that that's going to do is allow you to maybe reserve a court or something in advance. But we're not really sure yet, without the facility open, how many people are going to take us up on paying a nominal membership fee to make sure that you and your friend can have a court at a certain time. So in lieu of that, everything else is open to the public if we don't have something specifically scheduled in the facility.
Okay.
Are there any other questions? Councilor Erpenbach, please.
Question for Dave, please. Thank you, Mr. Townsend. Dave, talk about those items that are listed. I realize the ones that are in the agreement are sort of examples, but one of the things that's always been a concern with us, with the city providing money to a private entity, and it is a public-private partnership, I understand that, but if this business, this company goes defunct, and we're left with the stuff that we bought, I mean, that's all we have left is the bleachers or whatever it is we decide we're gonna buy, the HVAC system maybe.
Right.
How do you envision that working out? If they, God forbid, and I don't have I'm not making any assumptions that something's gonna happen to these folks. I think they're gonna do a great job, but we need to know what's plan B if something were to happen. If we own the HVAC system in a building that we don't own, how does that work?
Well, I think in reality, we would still own, we would maintain ownership of all the items that we would buy. And so if something went bad and they weren't able to make it as a business and it were to close, we would be able to have all of that equipment back for us to dispose of. However, now some of that in terms of bleachers, that kind of thing, we could probably repurpose in other recreational facilities. Others of the equipment we may choose to surplus. I think we'll just have to take a look at the point in time when that would happen, and hopefully it never does. But at that point in time that it would, we'd have to ask ourselves that question. I think the important thing is we retain ownership of it. So what we do with it will be our decision, and like I say, we have some options in terms of repurposing some of it as well. Hope that answers it.
Yep, thank you.
Councilor Henderson?
Just to continue on that, you did state that, some of these things we are going to own. And just as Councilor Erfenbach said, let's say it's the HVAC system. Is there going to be a second contract for like maintenance on that, or is the city going to be responsible for continuing maintenance on that system?
No, all of the equipment, it's basically the agreement is set up and that provision is set up so that we're a one-time buyer of it, and the association has to maintain that equipment from that time forward by the manufacturer's recommendations. Another provision in the agreement is that they have to keep records of the maintenance so that we can verify that they're doing just that they're keeping it maintained according to manufacturer recommendations. If they were not, they would be outside of compliance of the agreement.
Thank you.
Yep.
Dave, I have a question. Does the agreement allow for us to do a financial audit, or do they have to present a financial audit to the city at all?
What we have rights to are any of the information and records that they would have pertaining to our interest in the building. So in terms of any of the costs involved with maintaining the equipment and what they've spent on that, we would have access to that.
Okay, great, thank you. Are there any, Councilor Stegers, please?
Yes, this is a question I've been thinking about for some time, and I'm not sure, well, I'm just going to go ahead and ask you, Dave, and because I know some of my colleagues on the council have also been thinking about this too. And that is, we do have the mayor signing this contract, but the mayor's wife is also the executive director of the Sioux Falls Tennis Association. And of course, that brings up the question of conflict of interest. Has that been thoroughly discussed as whether there is a conflict of interest or not?
Yeah, you know, I think, no, not at any of the negotiations that we've been at. I mean, we've approached this as though what we're doing is we're negotiating with the Sioux Falls Tennis Association, of which she is a member. But Bill Townsend has been the one that we've been negotiating with all the way along, and she's not been involved. And so while we haven't asked the question, it hasn't really come up either, and it's probably outside of my expertise to be able to say whether that's an issue or not.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Councilor Rothring, please.
I'm reading through this audit of books, and correct me if I'm wrong. It says to me that and I listened to what you said, and it's what you said, we can audit only the open skate and that kind, and stuff that has to do with our equipment that we buy, that part of it, and nothing else?
I believe that's correct, unless Karen wants to correct me.
Karen, would you? Yeah.
Section 12, Karen Leonard, Deputy City Attorney. Section 12 of the agreement is on the audit of the books, and it says that the city shall have the right to audit the books of the SFTA relating or pertaining to the public participation during court rentals and the purchase, repair, and maintenance of the city's equipment. And then it talks about in whatever form they're kept. So we have two interests: to make sure it's open to the public and to make sure that our equipment is cared for properly under the agreement.
Okay, it would seem to me that if we're interested in having it open to the public, we would need the association is in, because it makes no difference if they say, well, you can have a lot more ice time and they're going under, and we can see it in 2 years down the line. We need to either start making preparations for that or whatever. I would think that if we should have ability to do an audit on ice whenever we want to, so that we can be aware of what their financial position is, so that we don't get caught with our pants down as we've done with other situations, have to take them over. The ice, or the Minnehaha Ice and Rec, whatever that's called now, is a perfect example. And I wonder if that was given any consideration.
It was, and the discussion was, we're going to have a member at their board meetings, whether they're monthly or quarterly, but we will be knowing their financial status at those board meetings. And so they could certainly report back to the city during that time. But we did not, in terms of the agreement, given that it's tied directly to, in this case, $500,000 towards the purchase of equipment, we tied the audit towards the purchase of equipment and getting public hours.
I understand the logic on it, but my logic says I'd rather know the whole position there. Is there any way, I don't know how the council feels about that, but to me it makes perfect sense. Is that something that they would go along with if we asked for it?
I'll let you take that.
We did kind of go down this road and discuss that a little bit. And I think where our negotiation team got to is feeling that if we owned the facility like we own Great Bear, that would maybe be more appropriate to ask for that level of oversight. But if we get into where we're reviewing their financial records and then perhaps trying to give them recommendations out to how to run what would be their facility, that may expose us also to giving them bad advice, wrong advice, or being the reason that they didn't make ends meet, so to speak. So I can tell you that's where some of that went to, Counselor.
Counselor Jamison, excuse me,
It still doesn't make sense to me, so,
can we,
Okay.
we'll come back? Counselor Jamison.
Thank you, Dave. These presentations seem a little out of order with the ice group already breaking ground, the tennis people yet to do it. But I understand they're kind of mirrored or similar in their nature, and both these projects are kind of new frontiers for the council to be a part of. Is there something else? I mean, I think that Karen just sat down way over there, so I feel bad about asking her to come back, but this particular contract, you know, is still yet to be groundbreaking and all the financial obligations met, so to speak. It's fluid enough, isn't it, to adjust and move along as they move along and whenever they do? Or when we sign this agreement, are we forcing them into a box that maybe they can't get into, and all of a sudden they can't operate or they can't do their business because we've forced them in? Do we need to do this contract for the tennis group right now?
Well, I think that,
You just want to keep them together? Is that part of the?
well, you know, that's part of it, but on the other hand, I think it would be good to go forward at this time with it. They've gone through their fundraising campaign, and it continues to show those donors who have made commitments that the city has, you know, now stepped up and they'd entered into an agreement. And so I think it could just continues to give the project, you know, viability as they go to collect on those.
That seems good. I just wanted to know if there was a motive to bring them together. The other is there anything missing that either of these groups need that would help them get in the ground sooner or do what they intended to do? I mean, I think you know, I don't want to get carried away here, but our focus at the beginning of this was to help make these things happen. And these should be exciting times for all of us to get these things going, but are we limiting their success in any way with these contracts that is going to hurt us in the long run?
I guess I won't speak for Bill on it, but I can tell you that you know, they've been at the table as we've negotiated these. You know, maybe ask Bill if he could address that.
Thank you for the question, Councilman Jamison. I think it's very key to the whole area where we're at. If we go back a few years, these were seed dollars that were hopefully through the Park and Rec CIP to help us have success in this public-private partnership that we've engaged in over the past number of years. We went through the Chamber of Commerce, got approved to do their chamber drive after the ICE folks completed theirs. We exceeded our goal in the chamber drive. So your $500,000 commitment through the CIP was what I referred to as some of that seed money, and now go out and get them and raise the rest. And so, no, I wouldn't suggest that you're holding us up or putting us in a box. One of the other things that Councilman Staggers brought up that I heard the first time I was here in front of the council was that, and we've had this as part of our cornerstone for our project, is that it's our goal not to carry any debt on this facility whatsoever. When we've been out raising money, I'd equate it to all of our personal budgets. If you're gonna build a house and you've got 100% of the money to build that house, it takes a lot of the risk out of it. That's the philosophy that our 60-plus volunteers went out and raised money. So that's been a commitment that I heard from Councilman Staggers about, you know, let's not over leverage this, go out and raise the money. I'm happy to report your $500,000 commitment is now turned in, whether you want that amount added in or not. With the $500,000 added in, we're at a $3 million level of dollars at the Sioux Falls Community Area Foundation that's handling all the funds. So we do include that 500,000, even though it was part of the 2013. So we're right at that $3 million level. Unfortunately, and one of the things that I want to be respectful of everybody's time, but as we've competed and have wanted to raise all the funds to build the facility, the longer you wait, the higher the costs go up. Things like the event center and a lot of the other activity that's going on in our wonderful community has increased the cost because a lot of the contractors out there are busy. So our costs started at $3 million, now they're in excess of $4 million. So if I could be so bold as to suggest that the $500,000 that the council approved a couple years ago doesn't come anywhere near to the 20% of this public-private partnership that we had originally talked to with the city, because that's just the facts of what have gone on out there. And I don't mean that negative, it's just the reality. Keith Thompson is here from Coke Hazard. They're our architect on the project. Fegan Construction has been hired. It's just a reality of what the costs are today to build it. Steel costs are up, concrete, everything. So I would throw it in front of the council that if we're truly going to be a public-private partnership, I'd be happy to present to you our financials from Fegan of what it costs to build today, and if there'd be any way the council would consider actually abiding by what was an agreement to fund 20% of the project, we'd love to have that discussion, but I don't know what the proper protocol for that is. Councilman Staggers, I also can't help but address your concern about a conflict of interest. As a business owner here in town, I don't tend to get into a lot of politics. I'm a volunteer in this. And I'd also suggest to you that as fair as your question is, Cindy Huther was a volunteer for the Sioux Falls Tennis Association well before her husband was elected mayor. She continues to do that on a volunteer basis. So whether that's something that, I just would like to address that she was volunteering in the Sioux Falls Tennis Association well before her husband became mayor. So I'd answer any other questions that you might have.
Councilor Anderson, please.
Just to expand on Councilor Rolfing's concern about the audit. I'm fine with the way the language is there, Bill, but if the council stated that, like other entities that we invest in, that maybe once a year we had a presentation from the tennis association on how they're doing, would that be something you'd be against?
I would not be against that. Actually, the Park and Rec folks brought that up as well. We're very agreeable to that, and we have no plans of not succeeding, especially when we've raised all the money to build the facility. And that's why I think Councilman Staggers, so yes, Councilman Anderson, absolutely. I'd be happy to appear here and report back, just as we've agreed to do with the Park and Rec as well. We do get in this ticklish position because we are a nonprofit organization, and so where do we start and stop with the whole financials of because then I believe that becomes public record for a thing, so how we could work through that, but I'm very open to that. We're very transparent. We want to make sure this is going to be a workable, so I have no issues with that, nor do I feel our board would.
Councilor Rolfing.
Yes, thank you. I would agree to that kind of a situation also, so that we're brought up to date on your financials on an annual basis. If that could be put into the agreement some way, that would be fantastic. I think that would be a good compromise.
I believe, and Dave might be able to address this, I believe the Park and Rec had asked that in their agreement, that we do an annual report for public usage and that sort of thing, and absolutely, be happy to do that.
We're not just talking public usage, we're talking financials then too.
Well,
when you come to visit with us.
Yeah, and at what point, it's again, not, I would be happy to give the council an update on our financial condition. As you look at a $3.5 million project, and the city's involvement is helping us purchase equipment. We're very specific of what we can use those dollars for, so it's not of the operation of the facility. So, like I said, I feel comfortable making that and giving you an update. I have no issues with that. My only concern, Councilman Rolfing, would be at what point does our financial records become public record for everybody? I don't know if that's a fairness thing to, not that we're trying to keep anything. We want to make sure that partners like the city know where we're at financially, so I guess I might have to.
If you're okay with knowing if you're okay with us knowing where you are financially, that means because of open meeting laws, et cetera, we've got to have that open. It'd be fun if you could, just feed it to us a little bit and do it outside of that realm, but we can't in these day and ages. So it almost has to be open knowledge. Now, I understand that we're in a situation where you are a nonprofit organization. However, that's some public money that's in there, and so that kind of throws a lever into or hammer into the works. And so, just to be safe and make sure that everything's open, I think that would be a wise thing for you and a wise thing for us to do also. So there's no questions. Thank you.
Karen, did you want to touch on that?
I would just say that I understand the council's desire to see that, and I'd like to go back to the group and see what we can do in terms of, what nonprofits are usually exposed to, and we want to be fair to the ICE and to the tennis groups about not requesting information that is ordinarily kept private, because even when we negotiate with some of our managers, there are certain documents that are proprietary to them and whatnot. So I think that I made notes, and by next week's meeting, we should have some resolution or at least some advice to give you rather than to blindly answer yes or no today.
Councilor Anderson, please.
Yeah, Karen, I guess something on the same format as like what we do with other nonprofits that we deal with, like the Multicultural Center, or even like the Sioux Empire Fairgrounds. We ask them to come in because there's some in-kind work that we do. I think something on that level would be about what we would be looking for.
Right, and I'll go back and take a look, and I think at the State Theater, we gave them money for the projector as well, so I'll look at that agreement as well.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Please,
Kermit. Karen, can I just ask you a technical question here?
Of course.
The ground lease that's in Exhibit C talks about the Community Indoor Tennis Center. But however, in our agreement, it's the Sioux Falls Tennis Association. Why do we have these two different labels?
In the ground lease that Sanford entered into
Yes,
with.
it's got Community Indoor Tennis Center. That's their agreement with them. But then we have the agreement with the Sioux Falls Tennis Association. Why we have these two different entities? Why not just Sioux Falls Tennis Association?
Yeah, I would have to go back and check to see why Sanford entered into it that direction. I'll have an answer for you. I'll find out.
Thank you.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councilor Karski, please.
I've been thinking about the financial part of that Councilor Rolfing's been discussing, and just trying to see where the need or what benefit we would get out of it. And if we have no lien holders' interests, we're not in charge of managing them. We can't tell them to do things differently. I agree with the proprietary nature of the information. I don't see where we need to know about their finances, but I do see, excuse me, public usage is important for us. We want to know, are we getting our money's worth? We agreed to, it will do this if the public can go there. I know what you're saying, Councilor Rolfing, but I really don't think we need to go that far, because I don't think we can't change anything. I mean, if something happened, all we can stand back and look and say, wow, unless I'm missing something. But I wouldn't have see a specific need for having to see their financials.
I think what I'll do, if you don't mind, I'm going to pull the conversation on this one off right now, but what I am going to do is request that this will be pulled off the consent agenda for November 19th. Counselor Staggers, there's been a few other questions. Karen said that she'll come to us with a little additional information, so this will be up for discussion again, I believe, at the next council meeting, if that's okay. Instead of on the consent agenda, we will pull this off, and it will be a discussion on the regular agenda. Okay, Dave?
Okay.
Okay, we're going to move on at this point in time to the next one, and I'm sure this will also be pulled off the consent agenda, so I'll just make that determination right now to save us all a little bit of angst here. There's going to be some discussion about this also, but I think that's appropriate because there's been some questions here, and I know they've got a great presentation too. So with that, Dave, we'll open it up to you again on the indoor ice facility agreement with the Ice Sports Association. Please.
Okay, thank you. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, the terms of the agreements are very similar in nature, but while the provisions for the items to be purchased, the maintenance of the items, the public benefits, the right to have a position on their board that oversees the facility are all things that are the same, I will point out a couple of differences. One is the dollar amount that's in the CIP is $1.5 million for the indoor hockey facility or indoor ice facility. Also another difference is that the Ice Sports Association, as you know, has already conducted a groundbreaking and is working to begin construction this fall with plans to finish their construction also in that fall of 2014. This agreement as well was voted on and passed unanimously on October 22nd by the Parks and Recreation Board to recommend approval of the agreement to the City Council. And our intention with this agreement also is to have it on the agenda for November 19th. And we have in the audience Joe Zuger, I believe Greg Starnes maybe didn't make it, and Sue Salter representing the Ice Sports Association, who has been their team for developing the agreement. And with that, I'd open this one up to any questions.
Great, thank you, Dave. That being said, I'd like to congratulate them on their groundbreaking. We're all looking, the community I know is looking forward to both of these facilities. That being said, are there any questions at this time for Dave concerning the ice? Councilor Staggers, please.
Yes, Dave, have we given them the $1,500,000 yet?
No.
Okay. Do you know when we might possibly be doing that? Or?
Actually, the provisions in the agreement are the same for this one. We'll need,
financially.
Yeah, right. They'll have to show proof of financial security.
Yeah.
Councilor Anderson, please.
And similar to the first contract, same thing with equipment. It'll be a one-time purchase.
Right. There's no obligation on the part of the city to maintain it or replace it if something goes wrong with it, or if it or when it becomes obsolete or unusable.
Any other questions? Councilor Rolfing, please.
I'm assuming you'll talk to them about the same concerns that I had, and we'll see what we can do, right?
Certainly.
Okay. Could I ask Sue or Joel, you guys are, as I remember, this is a pay for it now venture like the tennis association, or are you going to be borrowing money to complete the project?
Yeah, Joe Zuger with the Ice Sports Association. So I think we will have debt on the facility recs. The debt probably is best described as twofold. One would be bridge debt, because as you know, we've raised what will end up being probably close to 85% of the equity for the project privately. And so those pledge streams extend well beyond the date of opening and so on. So you end up having a situation where you've got income from rink operations after we open, as well as supplemental income from pledge streams. So our goal is to do construction loan, obviously, to get the facility built, and then convert that to a mortgage where we would then pay off the bulk of that mortgage early on with the pledge streams supplemented by rink operations. And the projections we have right now are that we probably, if you were to look at what would fall into the category of a long-term mortgage, like many of us might have on our homes, that dollar amount would be somewhere in the $1 million range.
Are there any other questions? Councilor Staggers, please.
So just to clarify, because I've got an email, well, not an email, but I got something about the Ice Hockey Association with their fundraising goals not achieving that by a significant amount. Is that correct?
No.
So how much have you actually
We've raised about $6.7 million to date. And that's inclusive of the $1.5 million, which we didn't really raise, but the public partnership component. We're in our final fundraising push and have a goal for another $1 million. We've raised about $100,000 towards that in the last few days. So our goal would be, when it's all said and done after expenses, that the equity towards the project would be in that $7.5 million range.
And how much of this is in hand, actually?
Well, if you count the $1.5 million in the CIP, which maybe we should or maybe we shouldn't, I'm going to go ahead and count it.
Okay.
That's liquid assets. We've got, Sue, $1.6 million in the bank. We have a anonymous donor. Well, actually, that's not money in the bank. So I think the answer to the question would be between cash in hand and money allocated and liquid, the number's just in excess of 300,000, or I'm sorry, in excess of 3 million. And a number of other substantial Shield Sports. We had an anonymous donor that some of you may recall who pledged $1 million match, which again isn't an upfront payment. It's termed out over several years. And again, that's what gives us this opportunity to have significant income in the first several years of operations that comes on people fulfilling their pledge obligations. And I can't discuss the terms of Shields or the anonymous donations, but it's substantial revenue to the organization.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you all. You know, I think this is I'm going to take just a moment to make a statement here. I know both groups have been very aggressive in the community in getting out and fulfilling their promises and their pledges to raise private dollars to build these facilities. They really have not asked the city, other than through the programs that have been explained by Dave, for funds, which goes towards the equipment, which I think is really key in this. And I'd like to thank both of them and thank your organizations for such a job well done. I think these facilities are going to serve the community well as we go into the future here. That being said, I'm going to adjourn this meeting. 10 minutes from now, we're going to convene the committee meeting. Meeting adjourned.